So I just want to preface this video by saying that this isn't actually really meant to be all that relatable. I don't want to be relatable. I actually think that's dishonest. I would rather be authentic more than relatable. I want to unapologetically be me. I'm not the poor adult that I was 10 years ago, struggling to sort of get by. I'm now in a position of privilege and comfort. And this monitor is not designed for the masses. And because of that, I know most people will never get to use or experience a monitor like this. So this video is my way of sharing the experience to people who won't otherwise get to test a monitor like this out. Unboxing and first impressions. I remember when I first unboxed this monitor, I was almost scared to pick it up. I was scared that I might drop it due to how valuable and expensive it was. The packaging and the unboxing experience was obviously very Apple. They've taken a lot of care to make sure that it was an experience in itself. With it being pretty much one whole aluminium block, the build quality and finishing is elite. I'm yet to come across another monitor that looks and feels as premium as this does. It makes sense though, considering the price. Due to how much heat the panel produces, the back has a very special and very unique lattice sort of pattern to help dissipate the heat. And for sure, it does look somewhat like a cheese grater, I'm not gonna lie. A very fancy and expensive looking cheese grater. It definitely does get warm though. The edges in particular is where you feel the heat from the panel. The back also has the I/O, which is very limited. There's one Thunderbolt port and 3 USB-C ports, so clearly Apple have designed this to only be used with a Mac. I also have bought both the VESA mount and the Pro stand just to give myself full flexibility. The Pro stand makes the most sense for my current setup as I'm not moving the monitor around much, and of course it looks incredible, matches the display the best. But it is $1,000, which is so much money for a stand. The front has equally thin bezels all the way around. I don't even understand how now, 5 years after this is being released, other manufacturers still add ugly lips or uneven bezels to their displays. By the way, make sure to check out my wallpaper packs. I use them throughout the video. I have a ton in all sorts of styles. I'll leave a link to my store in the description. I specifically went for the glossy panel instead of the nano texture. I just personally prefer it over the nano texture, and I don't really have any issues with reflections. The 6K resolution. So this is the main key feature and the reason why I keep coming back to this monitor. That 6K resolution is just incredible. It's difficult to explain how useful it is until you use it yourself for a few days. You realize how much more space you have in apps like Final Cut Pro, where I'm editing 4K footage. I can see the full video in its full 4K resolution, but still have room for the UI around it. I also spend a lot of my time in apps like Figma, designing stuff. Being able to see multiple boards at full resolution is an absolutely huge productivity boost. Here is an example of how much more you can fit on a 4K display compared to the Pro Display XDR. You can see there's a lot more room for content, and it's nearly as good as having 2 displays in one. Technically, you could actually scale a 4K display to show the same amount of detail. You could scale it down to have the same amount of UI and everything that you're seeing. But it then becomes a mess due to the UI scaling. You're not perfectly scaling the resolution. So the text, the icons, and everything else with the UI isn't pixel perfect. It just looks a bit blurry to the eye. When it comes to HDR content, this is a true HDR monitor as well. You see monitors, they say that they have a HDR capability, but the implementation is usually just garbage. Apple have done it incredibly well with this monitor. This is a mini LED panel with over 500 dimming zones, and it can go up to 1600 nits peak brightness. I can't really show how bright that is on camera as I'm not recording this video in HDR, but macOS does such a great job with HDR content. When you're viewing anything HDR, it only brightens up that part of the screen. So for example, here's a video on YouTube that's in HDR, and you can see how much brighter it is compared to the rest of the display. For any of you with a more recent MacBook Pro, one with a mini LED display, you will actually see the same effect. Now, you just got to imagine it on a larger scale. I found myself purposely watching great HDR movies on here due to just how much more vivid they look. I'm hoping this part doesn't get copyrighted, but Transformers 1 in particular looks freaking amazing. A very underrated movie, by the way. I watched it a few months ago, not really expecting much, but it is fantastic. It's a really great movie. Now, it's not perfect. There are definitely some issues. So this has actually been said in a lot of other reviews. The panel is definitely darker around the edges. It's not super noticeable unless you're actually looking for it, but it is there. Day to day, I barely notice it because I'm rarely actually ever looking right at the edges of the display. Usually my stuff is obviously on the middle of the display. That's what it's like for most people. So day to day, you won't really notice it that much. Viewing angles also aren't that great. Brightness does shift when you're changing the viewing angle. Again, I'm not noticing it day to day because obviously I'm sat right in front of it with the monitor facing directly at me. so I don't really notice any issues with the viewing angles. There's also no webcam and there's no speakers, which for me is not really an issue at all, but I can completely see it being an issue for other people. I would always prefer my own webcam. I actually have a webcam that I usually just put on top of the display, have it just behind there, and I would much prefer my own speakers. A dedicated pair of speakers will always beat built-in speakers every time. And there's of course the 60 Hz refresh rate. It would definitely be nice if it had 120 Hz like the MacBook Pros, but I'm willing to live with 60 Hz for now. I actually use LG's special dual mode refresh rate monitor that they have. It's part of my gaming setup, which is behind here. So I know exactly how amazing high refresh rate monitors are. Yet I would much prefer the higher resolution of 6K for my Mac setup over a high refresh rate display. I think resolution itself, having all that resolution, having that density of pixels, is more useful than having a high refresh rate. Now, who is this monitor even for? Considering the price point of this monitor, it's definitely not targeted towards the average consumer. At $5,000, it's clearly targeted for businesses and pro users. This isn't a consumer product. This is a professional business grade product. And this is where I think a lot of people seem to be getting it wrong. It's not designed to compete with the likes of consumer grade displays. It's actually designed to compete with professional monitors that are tens of thousands of dollars. At the time that this was released, like 5 years ago now, there weren't really any competitors sort of around its price range. However, that has changed a little. ASUS have actually recently released the PA32UCD-M, which is a ProArt 4K OLED monitor, and it's actually more color accurate than the Pro Display XDR. I actually have that monitor. I've been using it for the past few weeks and it's incredible. It's ideal for anyone who does color accurate work and they don't need the resolution of 6K. It's also less than $2,000, so it's a lot cheaper than the Pro Display XDR. But again, after using 6K, it's so hard for me to go back to 4K for my Mac setup. So 4 years later, I think to myself, after spending technically $6,000 because I bought the monitor and the stand, has it been worth it? Over 4 years, if I split that money, that's $1,500 a year. I could pretty much buy a new studio display every year with that money. So it's a lot of money. But you know what? I would do it again. This monitor for me has been an investment for my work and it enables me to be more productive. It makes me want to create stuff. It's the mindset itself. Knowing that I've spent this much makes me have this confirmation in my head that it'll help me do more. It's a weird thing, but also the amount I've spent on this monitor, I think to myself, for my business overall and sort of the way my YouTube channels work, how I'm designing websites, apps, and just working on other stuff as well, it's just such a good investment. Like, it makes me that money back easily. Like, it's actually a very small expense in the grand scheme of things. Now, I wouldn't actually go buy one right now, this year, at this very moment, mainly because I expect Apple to announce a new version of it, probably this year, later this year. Now that the new MacBook Pros, which I have here, I have the M4 Max MacBook Pro, has Thunderbolt 5, which is capable of a lot more data, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a 120Hz Pro Display XDR. It'll also either be tandem OLED, like the iPad, or mini LED. However, I am leaning more towards mini LED, mainly because OLED still has burn-in issues. And I know what Apple are going to be like. They're not going to want to take too much of a risk with OLED and the burn-in issues that it has with a monitor like this, where a lot of the content is quite static. Like your menu bar and your dock are going to be static all the time on this display. So that can definitely result in burn-in. So I do think they're going to have mini LED with just a ton more dimming zones. But yeah, 4 years later, I'm very happy with my purchase. Like, I don't have any regrets. And from speaking to other people who have the Pro Display XDR, which is a surprising number of people who follow me, like I'm quite surprised at how many of you have Pro Display XDRs, all of you seem to be very happy with it. All of you seem to be very happy with your purchase. So there's this sort of specific market for the Pro Display XDR. There's a specific type of person that's interested in it. And for those people, it seems to be an amazing purchase. Like for myself, it's been an amazing purchase. I'm very happy with it. Hopefully that helps you sort of understand my 4-year experience with it. I mean, it's just a monitor that sits on my desk and helps me do work. There isn't much else to it. But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter and subscribe for more.